So what does salt have to do with weight? Wherever sodium goes, water flows. And when there is an imbalance of the ratio between sodium and potassium, metabolic diseases and weight gain occurs. Hi friends, can't lose weight? Could it be salt? There are many different salts, which include your body's top three: sodium, potassium, and magnesium. These salts can each influence your metabolism and energy balance, appetite, and hormones to ultimately dictate your weight. Now, I addressed magnesium in another video, so in this video, we will go over which foods are high in sodium and potassium, how it affects your weight, and how much you actually need in a day of either one. So let's talk about sodium first, since this is the most popular and abundant salt consumed in food. Sodium has many important biological functions, including transmitting nerve signals, contracting and relaxing muscle fibers, and maintaining proper fluid balance. Experts like the WHO and CDC are all telling us to cut down on sodium. Now, are they trustworthy or just pulling our leg and not solving real health problems in the world? At the rate that we are creating chronic illnesses and imploding our healthcare systems, they are either asleep at the job or they need better PR people. Are we really getting too much of this ancient mineral? Let's dive into some medical science. Now, I have here some Austrian salt from a salt mine that started over 2,600 years ago. I personally visited that salt mine myself and bought this as a souvenir. Austrian salt mines are on record as the earliest salt mines known to man. Really, all salt buried in earth is ancient, with Himalayan salt mines being over 550 million years old. Now, did you know that Himalayan salts are not actually from the Himalayan mountains? They are the salt mines of Pakistan, which was under ocean water over 550 million years ago. I have here a rock that is probably millions of years old. My son gave it to me for Christmas, and I'm sure if your child gave you a rock, it's probably also millions of years old. The point is, all of these minerals are natural minerals from the earth, which is 4.5 billion years old. So your edible salt mined from the earth will be old. The dirt you walk on is also old. Sodium is the sixth most abundant element on earth and makes up 2.6% of the earth's crust. Now, whether your salt is made from evaporating ocean water yesterday or formed millions of years ago, the biological effects are the same. We know sodium adds flavor to food, but did you know liquid sodium actually cools nuclear reactors and lights up your brilliant yellow street lamps? However, you will never find sodium pure. It's always found attached to another element or molecule like sodium chloride, sodium bicarbonate, or monosodium glutamate. Have you ever wondered why you can't buy pure sodium? That's because it's unstable and will explode when it hits the air. Sodium is an alkaline metal, and I think of it as always wanting a buddy. Sodium wants to find a partner so badly that it will literally throw itself onto other elements and molecules. These are the stories that I made up when I took chemistry, which was one of my favorite college classes. Actually, I took 2 years of inorganic and organic chemistry and then 2 years of biochemistry classes before medical school. Biochemistry was my undergraduate major, and this is why just about all my videos go into biochemical mechanisms. Now, if I didn't go to medical school, I would have thoroughly enjoyed just being a forever college student. If that could be a job, I would have applied. Now, if you remember your high school chemistry about electrons and protons and neutrons, well, technically all alkaline metals have an extra electron in their outer shell that they want to donate. Chlorine only has 7 electrons and it wants to have 8 to complete its outer shell. Hence, sodium chloride is a perfect marriage. Sodium chloride is table salt. All the commercially edible added sodium salts are predominantly sodium chloride, and these include iodinated table salt, sea salt, kosher salt, Himalayan salt, fleur de sel, black salt, rock salt, and pink salt. However, because amongst all the alkaline metals, sodium has the highest threshold to toxicity, you will find sodium hidden as other ingredients in your food. Now, this all adds up to your total body sodium load, because it's not just sodium chloride that gives you sodium when you eat processed meats and carbohydrates. And this is exactly why processed foods are so deceptive, and you truly need at least a college chemistry course to understand the ingredient labels. But no worries, I hope my videos will summarize the practical points of college chemistry to real life. Are there any health differences between added salts? The only salt that has been definitively proven to have health benefits is the cheap iodinated salt. Now, keep in mind, if the salt is not fortified with iodine, it will not have any clinically relevant iodine. Sea salt and fleur de sel has essentially zero iodine, despite it coming from the ocean. If you're concerned about your thyroid, then you should pay close attention to your iodine sources in your food. Iodine deficiency is a worldwide problem affecting over 100 countries, including the United States. Now, populations highest at risk are pregnant and breastfeeding women and vegans or vegetarians. Plants are not a good source of iodine, and the best sources are seafood like seaweed. Animal products don't have iodine unless farm animals eat food with iodine. Dairy is also not a reliable source of iodine. Dairy will have trace amounts of iodine because the udders are sanitized with iodophoric cleaner solutions. So the cleaner will drip into the milk. And to me, that's just gross. Drinking breast milk and then having that breast milk contaminated with cleaning agents. There's just something unnatural about the whole thing. Now, without iodine, your thyroid, which is a gland in your neck, can't make thyroid hormones. And we need at least 20 micrograms of iodine a day to prevent hypothyroidism, which means low thyroid. That's a pretty low bar. And when it comes to health, aiming for the minimal dose to prevent disease should not be the goal. The optimal level of daily dietary iodine is closer to 150 micrograms a day. Unless you are breastfeeding, then that level is 290 micrograms a day. Even 1 milligram a day is considered to be a safe intake. Now, the first sign that you're low in thyroid hormones is a goiter, which is a swollen gland that is trying to make up for the lack of iodine. Now, this picture is obviously a bad goiter, but before you get to this stage, you will have just a little bump that people who are overweight are unlikely to notice. One of my friends worked with a world-renowned endocrinologist whose bread and butter was all about the thyroid. He walked past her in the hall one day and just told her to get her thyroid checked. And sure enough, her thyroid hormones were abnormal. Now, to find your thyroid, stick your chin up a little and look at the area underneath your voice box that is nestled between the diagonal muscles that go to your collarbones. Now, the gland can be H-shaped or U-shaped, and it has 2 lobes on each side of your windpipe. When women have their periods or are pregnant, this gland can actually be a little bit bigger. However, if it is bulging or stays large, then you may have a goiter. A real medical doctor should palpate it as a part of your annual physical, regardless if you have symptoms or not. They basically put their hands around your neck and then they push hard on your neck and they ask you to swallow. And they're feeling the contour of your thyroid gland or nodules in your thyroid to check for thyroid cancer. Thyroid hormones are essential for life. Children who don't have enough thyroid hormones will have permanent mental developmental delays. Your thyroid plays a central role in metabolism, including weight gain or weight loss. If you don't have enough thyroid hormone, you won't lose weight. You will have high cholesterol and feel tired and depressed. Your skin will be dry, your hair will be coarse, and you'll be very sensitive to cold temperatures. Every year, as a part of your annual blood work, thyroid hormones should be measured. You may be amazed that the thyroid gland weighs less than a kiwi fruit, but it is vital for your health and life, producing 3 essential hormones to regulate your weight, cholesterol, blood sugar, bone mass, immunity, muscle and skin growth, and mood. But it can't do any of that without essential minerals and vitamins, especially a unique mineral called iodine. So it is vital for you to make sure you have iodine, as literally the 2 main thyroid hormones, T4 and T3, are made out of iodine. So if iodine is so important, then why should we cut back on salt? Now, remember the list that I showed you on sodium? None of it has iodine in it. Most processed foods use a lot of sodium without the benefit of iodine. And if you are interested in iodine, you actually don't need more than half a teaspoon of iodinized salt in a day. And that is 1,500 milligrams, which is recommended to be the maximum amount of sodium that normal people without heart failure should ingest. A deficiency of sodium pretty much doesn't occur in normal conditions. And when it does occur, it usually is in the setting of kidney disease, severe adrenal insufficiency, chronic diarrhea, vomiting, or continuous gastric suction, extreme and prolonged sweating, medications like diuretics, or extensive burns. Toxicity occurs in people with heart failure, liver failure, kidney failure, and usually they feel it with excess fluid because wherever sodium goes, water flows. Your body has a total of about 9 ounces or 4 salt shakers of sodium, which makes up 0.4% of your body weight. A third of your sodium is found outside of your cells, and movement of sodium is dependent on a special pump called the Sodium-Potassium pump. Now, just like the name implies, another salt, potassium, is needed to shuttle sodium, and when there is an imbalance of the ratio between sodium and potassium, metabolic diseases and weight gain occurs. And this is why it is important to learn about salts. Your body can handle about 750 milligrams of sodium a day. This brand has 510 grams of sodium in one serving. A cardiac nurse told me a story about how she went on a hike, and at the end of the hike, her friend gave her a packet of electrolytes, which she blindly chugged down, and then she read the ingredients. It had 1,000 milligrams of salt. As a cardiac nurse who helps people with heart failure, she knew that that was just a bad thing to drink. Now, people consume electrolytes as if their diets were devoid of salt, but the average American diet is already eating 3,400 milligrams of salt without the electrolyte packets. Now, if you're not sweating in extreme heat for half a day like miners or farm workers in summer heat for 10 to 12 consecutive hours, recreational hike is unlikely to need those electrolyte drinks when you're already consuming sodium in processed foods. Now, when I was younger, my mom would take me on the weekend to Carl's Jr., and I would eat a Famous Star, and occasionally she would buy me fried zucchini. Together, this was over 1,000 calories in one meal, which is around all the calories I needed for a day. There was also 1.5 times the amount of sodium that an adult should eat in an entire day. Sometimes she would let me order a soda. Even back then, soda was made from high fructose corn syrup. Now, even if I didn't drink the soda, that salt induced my own body to make fructose. And yes, your body makes fructose when you overeat sodium. Now, what's worse is that salty foods drives hunger and the craving for more sugar. And so I went back for several refills of soda. And this is why, as a child, I was overweight. And my mom's solution was to just tell me to eat less. But it's impossible to eat less when you are surrounded by processed foods that manipulate your hormones, hunger, and metabolism. Once I remember going home from school and opening a can of soda and eating a chocolate bar that I was selling as a fundraiser. But I didn't just eat one bar. I looked at the box and there were only 5 bars left, so I just emptied the box and ate all of them. Now, needless to say, I was my best customer. Now, if my mom wanted me to eat less junk, then she really shouldn't have brought it home, although the candy bar was my idea to bring home. She expected me to have the discipline not to eat junk. Well, I'm sorry, but even young, studious, and budding physicians are not immune to the pleasures of processed food. But at a certain point, I realized I was tired of gaining weight, so I transitioned from regular soda to diet soda, thinking that it was a healthier alternative. Boy, I was wrong. It also doesn't help with weight loss. I've yet to meet anyone who loses weight drinking diet drinks, but you can lose your bone mass, kidney health, and increase kidney stones, plaques, asthma, and inflammation with regular consumption of diet sodas. So let's go back to salt, because the problems with salt are actually even worse than just gaining weight. I hate to be the doom and gloom doc, but as an infectious disease medical doctor, my job is to find and hopefully prevent the root cause of sickness. And unlike people who specialize in organs, infections can happen in any organ at any part of your body. And the people who get the most infections are the ones who are the most metabolically unhealthy. And that includes people who have underlying cancer. Now, do you know anyone who has stomach cancer or kidney cancer? Stomach cancer is on the rise. Both cancers are hard to diagnose early. And did you know that salt increases the risk of both? Salt has been suspected to be a carcinogen since the 1950s, but it's hard to definitively prove this link. Salt is like tobacco smoke. There's just no ethical way to prove definitively that tobacco causes cancer, as you would need to randomize 2 groups of people and make non-smokers smoke. That's really not ethical. And it's even harder to do this kind of rigorous study with sodium salt. But the association has been present for decades. So how does salt cause cancer? There's several ways. Salt actually irritates the stomach lining. Have you ever poured salt on an open wound? Painful, right? Think of your stomach as constantly having open wounds. I mean, it's literally a bag that shakes up all different kinds of food pieces, including sharp ones. Now, the sharp ones can scrape the inside of your stomach. Have you ever eaten something crunchy and stabbed yourself in the gums chewing it? That is painful. Now, imagine that happening in your stomach. This is why chewing carefully and chewing well are both important. A friend of mine literally cut open his food pipe called the esophagus with a tortilla chip because he didn't chew well. Now, if you pour salt over that open wound, you can cause even more irritation, which can allow toxins to enter your wound, further irritating the stomach. Now, imagine drinking a glass of wine and pouring that wine over that irritated tissue. That too will cause further irritation. Do you quickly see how all these events are additive injuries? Now, this is one reason why I don't eat salted fermented vegetables or drink alcohol. Now, the second thing that happens when you eat a lot of sodium is that it makes you retain water, which doesn't just make you gain weight, look bigger, and feel bloated, but it actually puts a lot of pressure on your kidneys. Your kidneys are like buckets collecting water under waterfalls of arteries. Have you ever filled a water balloon with your faucet? I did that a few times and realized I can't turn the faucet on too high or the balloons would fill too quickly, blow up, and pop. And when you add excess salt to your diet, you're basically turning the faucet up too quickly, and your kidneys are like the balloons at the end of the faucet, bearing all the pressure. Like damaging a balloon, that pressure is damaging your kidneys, increasing your risk of kidney cancer and permanent kidney injury, thinning your kidneys, just like how water balloons thin when there is too much water pressure. This is what high blood pressure does to kidneys, painlessly and silently, every hour of every day that your blood pressure is elevated. But most people, what they have is simply silent high blood pressure, and they don't realize their perpetual high blood pressure is due to excess sodium intake. Now, natural foods, unprocessed foods, are higher in sodium if they are from the ocean. So marine animals such as shellfish, followed by animal meats, are higher in sodium, whereas fruits and vegetables and cereals are naturally low in sodium. And of course, once you process that food and add any form of sodium or sauces that contain sodium, then the sky's the limit of how much sodium that food can have. In fact, the most common way people consume sodium is in some form of processed cereal product like breads and pizzas. So even though the original grain was low in sodium, processing adds a ton of sodium to make that grain product super unhealthy. So what does salt have to do with weight? First of all, if you're iodine deficient, you will become hypothyroid, and not only will you not be able to lose weight, but you will probably gain weight. So let's say iodine isn't the problem. How else does sodium make you gain weight? I mentioned that wherever sodium goes, water flows, and that people with kidney problems cannot regulate their body's sodium or water balance. 35 million adults, or 14% of adults in the US, or 1 in 7 people in America have chronic kidney disease. And 9 out of 10 of those with chronic kidney disease, they don't even know they have it. So if you have kidney disease, you will retain water and get swelling whenever you eat excess sodium. And that excess probably doesn't even reach 1,500 milligrams. Now, you can have this imbalance at a much lower level of sodium intake depending on the severity of your kidney disease. So reach down and press your ankles with your fingers like this and hold it for a few seconds. Now, when you let go, if you see an indentation of where your finger is after you remove it, you are retaining fluid and you should see a real medical doctor to get that evaluated. So who's really at risk of kidney disease? 1 in every 3 American adults are at risk of severe kidney disease. Now that is an astronomically high number. How many friends do you have? 1 out of 3 of your friends are at risk of getting kidney disease. Now, if your friend has diabetes, high blood pressure, over 60, obesity, heart disease, past damage to their kidneys, or have a family history of kidney disease, they are all at higher risk of having kidney disease themselves. If your friend is a minority, Hispanic or Latino, Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander, American Indian, Native Alaskan, they are also at higher risk of developing kidney disease. And let's say you're none of these and you don't get regular primary care checkups. You are also at higher risk of having kidney disease. I'm not telling you these facts to scare you. That's really not the point. I'm just the messenger. Facts are facts, and you should know these facts. It's like gravity. It doesn't change whether you believe it or not, whether you know about it or not. But if you don't know the principles of gravity and you jump off a roof, you're going to suffer medical consequences. Likewise, if you don't understand the importance of sodium balance and just base your eating habits on whether or not the food tastes good, you can literally kill your kidneys. Now, this process doesn't happen overnight. It is a slow process that can happen over decades until one day your kidneys just can't handle it anymore. And the good news is there are ways to slow down kidney damage. The scar tissue done by high blood pressure can't be reversed, but if you can remove the insult, many times the kidney will improve. Now, this is why it's important to understand the significance of high blood pressure so that you can work to reduce it through your diet and lifestyle. The majority of your sodium in your diet is not from you adding salt, but eating processed foods. And the number one culprits are sandwiches and pizza. So if you want to cut down your sodium intake, then you may want to consider learning how to cook with fresh spices. Now, it's recommended that you take your blood pressure at rest, but in reality, how often do you spend at rest? And did you know that heart attacks happen more commonly on Mondays? Physical stress from exercise or emotional stress from hormones all contribute to higher blood pressure. And when your blood pressure is high, it impacts all of your organs, including your heart. That is why you need to know what your blood pressure is when you are at rest and when you are not at rest, because your body can only tolerate so much pressure change. 1 in 2 adults in America have high blood pressure. That is an astounding figure. And what's worse is that only 1 out of 4 adults with high blood pressure have it under control. Now, remember how high blood pressure thins out your kidney? Well, high blood pressure also thins out brain tissue and increases dementia and strokes, and it weakens your immune system. And the best thing you can do for your health is to get your blood pressure normal through your diet and lifestyle. If you only rely on medications, your medications will eventually fail and you will need more medications. Common medications used to treat blood pressures can also increase your risk of bacterial infections. And this is why it's super important to reduce sodium. It is recommended not to exceed 2,000 milligrams by the WHO and 2,300 milligrams by the American Heart Association. But if you have high blood pressure, that limit is 1,500 milligrams a day. Deli meat sandwiches are the worst. A 2-ounce serving has 500 milligrams of sodium. And just about every Subway sandwich exceeds your body's normal capacity of sodium at 750 milligrams per day. Their pastrami sandwich has almost 3,000 milligrams of sodium. Processed foods in general are high in sodium, even if you eat a Cobb salad at Chick-fil-A. That's 1,700 milligrams of sodium, which exceeds a person's limit if they have high blood pressure. Now, I'm sure the sodium content would be lower if you remove the dressing, the cheese, and the chicken. So the take-home message is to limit or avoid takeout. Now, the easiest thing to do is to check your own blood pressure at home. And if you have high blood pressure, work with your medical doctor on your diet and lifestyle. And really, you should be checking it every day. Now, keep in mind, unhealthy amounts of sodium are in sports drinks, electrolyte drinks, prepackaged foods, snacks, and especially pre-made deli meats and seasoned meats, because salt actually hides the rancid taste of iron and other metals in meat. Now, jerky meats, sandwich meats, and restaurant foods always use way too much sodium. And if you like salt, you are not alone. Almost everyone overeats foods loaded with sodium, not knowing that it causes inflammation, starting with your blood vessels within 30 minutes of eating it. Now, we aren't born liking salt. It is a trained taste, unlike sugar. Your body's cravings are unlikely to lead you to eat healthy foods in our modern food industry. Now, it's really hard to taste the difference in your food between sodium and potassium. And that's why a few salt substitutes are made out of potassium. And when you are craving for salt, it may not be sodium. You may think, what's the big deal? If you eat more sodium, you'll just drink more water to dilute it. The salt actually suppresses your thirst. Astronauts fed 12 grams of sodium a day, which is equivalent to eating about 19 slices of pizza, drank the least amount of water compared to those given less salt at 9 grams or 6 grams over 2 months. When you eat excess salt, your hormones change to regulate your body's salt and water balance. These changes don't just go away when you stop eating salt. They actually change your body's response to salt for weeks and months. The more salt you eat, the more your kidneys will conserve water, and this in turn makes you less thirsty. But the more salt you eat, the more food with salt you will crave. And this is not just because food doesn't taste good when you take the salt out. High salt diets increase your metabolic demand for energy to make urea, the base product of nitrogen metabolism, which is basically an element found in eating protein. And this is one way high salt diets cause metabolic syndromes such as diabetes, heart disease, and obesity. So salt not only makes you retain water, but it also makes you fat from overeating. And we all know that if you took out salt, you really would simply just eat less food. Deli meats wouldn't taste so good. Neither would hot dogs, bacon, your baked chicken, your steak, nor would your noodles, chips, crackers, pizzas, sauces, or French fries. Notice how every restaurant automatically gives you more salt on the table because they know if you add it, you're going to be eating more food. Try air popping popcorn without salt, or McDonald's or In-N-Out French fries without salt. How about steak, potatoes, or bread without salt? None of it tastes as good compared to the salted versions. Salt hides off taste and the rancid taste of oxidized metals and meats, and hence frozen and pre-seasoned meats, because they're not fresh, will have more salt. I was yo-yoing in my weight until I quit adding salt and seeking processed salty foods. The more salt I ate, the more food I ate. Now my palate is very sensitive to salt, and when I eat out, if the food is too salty, I don't enjoy it and I simply won't eat it. That significantly controls my calories and my salt intake effortlessly. Have you seen how many calories you can overeat at restaurants? There is twice as much sodium in this one dish than the maximum amount of sodium a person should eat in an entire day. Now, my cardinal rule is if I'm going to add salt, it can't be sweet or fatty. In this noodle dish, there is 143 grams of fat, including 5 grams of trans fat, which was banned in processed foods sold in America in the supermarkets. There's also 85 grams of saturated fat, and if your goal is to lose weight, then you should definitely not eat trans fat and avoid saturated fat, especially saturated fat eaten with processed carbohydrates. That's the worst combination of eating. There are 145 grams of carbohydrates in this one meal alone. And when you eat a Costco blueberry muffin, there are 580 calories, 30 grams of which is fat, with 7 grams of saturated fat and 500 milligrams of sodium in each muffin. Now, if you ate 3.75 muffins, you would be eating the equivalent calories to this dish and have still eaten less fat, especially saturated fat, and less sodium. Believe it or not, that muffin is overall a metabolically healthier food than the Alfredo noodle, although technically neither is actually a healthy food. So when I add salt for taste, that will only be on some kind of fibrous vegetable. Otherwise, I'll end up eating a lot of high-calorie processed foods. Some of my friends have noticed that they begin to swell when they eat salt, and then they'll notice their blood pressure creeping up too. And this is because wherever salt travels, water will follow. And between the increase in water pressure and the constriction of blood vessels within 30 minutes of eating salt, you can easily understand how you can get elevated blood pressures. Now, you may still have a hard time believing that an essential micronutrient like sodium can be so harmful. And like everything else in life, it's really a balance. Water is essential and running water is good for your house, but a water leak is damaging. My friend remodeled her entire kitchen due to 2 inches of standing water on her floor from a tiny leak in her reverse osmosis filter. Your body is actually very good at conserving sodium and will change how much sodium you absorb and how much sodium you excrete depending on how much sodium you need. However, it's also easy to overwhelm the system with a flood of sodium. Now, it's helpful to literally count the milligrams of sodium in everything you eat. And if you're not an athlete or excessively sweating, you really don't need more than 1,000 milligrams of sodium salt in a day spread out in all of your food. Now, that's less than half a teaspoon of added sodium. And in fact, if you have heart failure, they recommend that you don't exceed 1,500 milligrams of sodium in a day. The average American diet is getting at least 3,400 milligrams of sodium. And like everything else in the body, when you have an excess of one item, it really affects another item. And that other item is another essential salt called potassium, which people don't eat enough of. The body actually needs more potassium than sodium. Most potassium is stored inside cells, whereas there is 4 times more sodium outside of cells compared to inside. Remember the sodium and potassium pump? Well, sodium and potassium work together, but in opposite ways. Where sodium goes, potassium leaves. Sodium elevates blood pressure and potassium can lower blood pressure. The more potassium you eat, the more sodium you will urinate out. Your dietary sodium to potassium ratio is an indicator of your diet quality. The lower the ratio, the healthier your diet quality. The ideal ratio is less than 1. Now, if you didn't do anything else but fix this ratio through your diet, you will significantly notice an improvement in your weight, your blood sugars, your fatty livers, your blood pressure, and health over a short period of time. Now, this is not the same as taking supplements or prescription medications to achieve that goal. At one point, our ancestors ate 10,000 milligrams of potassium a day, and I'm sure you've heard bananas are high in potassium. Well, that's not exactly true, as a medium-sized banana has 422 milligrams of potassium. Imagine how many bananas you have to eat to reach 10,000 milligrams of potassium a day. I don't think I could eat that many bananas. A more efficient way to get potassium is in leafy greens and beans. 99% of Americans eat a potassium deficient diet because they don't eat enough leafy greens and beans. There is a narrow range of normal potassium, and when you have too low or too high, irregular heartbeats called arrhythmias can happen. It is recommended that every adult, except those who have kidney problems, should be targeting at least 2,600 milligrams of potassium-rich foods in a day. If you eat a cup of cooked lima beans, that's almost 1,000 milligrams of potassium. A cup of cooked Swiss chard is 961 milligrams of potassium, and a cup of cooked yam has 911 milligrams of potassium. Hence, eating 5 cups of vegetables, at least 3 cups of fruits, and 3 cups of beans can easily help to meet the daily dietary potassium requirements and control weight. But I know the reality is people love to add sodium to food, and different salts, they taste different because of other ingredients. But have you wondered which added salt is actually the healthiest? Now, when you choose your salt, you should know what's in it. Kosher salt is coarse and it's pure sodium chloride. Table salt is iodinated and it has anti-caking agents, but is 99% sodium chloride, usually fortified with iodine. Now, goiters are not just an American issue. This condition occurs all over the world. In 1918, 30% of potential U.S. Army recruits were rejected due to suspected iodine deficiency. But here's a success story of how truly a good public health system works. So in the 1920s, the Michigan State Public Health realized that nearly 60% of their residents suffered from iodine deficiency. It was so bad that their farm animals got goiters. So then Michigan State got together with private industry, the Michigan Salt Company, and asked them to fortify their salt with iodine. And the first commercial product of iodinized salt hit the grocery stores in May 1st, 1924. Experts then began lecturing all across the state, and by that fall, iodinized salt was sold all across the nation. 10 years later, a repeat survey in 1935 showed that goiters had decreased by 90% in the state of Michigan. Now, it's important to know this history so that we can replicate the success in other areas in nutrition. Thyroid disease is actually very common. 20 million people in the United States have some kind of thyroid condition. Dietary iodine deficiency once plagued the northern United States, known as a goiter belt, with Michigan being the epicenter. This is a young child with goiter from iodine deficiency, and people commonly walked around with bulging necks. Now, iodine is a micronutrient found abundantly in ocean foods because iodine is abundant in our oceans. However, this element is not abundant all over the world, as typical soil far from the oceans are deficient, especially in mountainous regions and flood-prone areas. The difference in the plants grown in deficient soil can be 1,000 times less than plants grown in iodine-rich soils. So if you are a home gardener, you should invest in a good fertilizer. Now, can you believe that in 1995, 20% of the Chinese population in China had iodine deficiency, even though the problem was first identified in 1930. It took them 30 years later, 1960, to begin to fortify iodine in food. Ironically, the Chinese had medical writings dating as far back as 3,600 BC describing how eating seaweed and burnt sea sponge decreased the size of goiters. And this is why it is important to understand the history of nutrition. Now, ancient cultures may not have the complete scientific picture, but their wisdom can help guide our modern prevention and treatments. In America, iodine deficiency became more prevalent after World War I, when they noticed that 30% of military recruits had goiters, which disqualified them from military service. And during that time, they supplemented schoolgirls with iodine in Ohio and showed that Those with supplemental iodine had less goiters than girls on placebo. Now, across the Atlantic Ocean, the Swiss began its iodinized salt program in 1922 as their residents in the Swiss Alps also suffered from hypothyroidism. Again, no country is sheltered from iodine deficiency. Now, Michigan's goiter problem was actually identified in 1895, but nothing was done about it until the 1920s. And Michigan's success story is an example around the world where you needed government intervention to change the health of their citizens, just like a ban on cigarettes and enforcement of seatbelt laws. When government and private industry work together to improve the health of their people, great things can happen. All salts have between 85 to 95% sodium chloride, with the other 5 to 15% being with different ratios of calcium, potassium, and magnesium. Despite being from the sea, there's no iodine in sea salt. Celtic sea salt is from France. Himalayan pink salt is 96 and 90% sodium chloride, with the remaining 2% being trace minerals like iron, responsible for that pink color. That's actually the color of oxidized iron. And apparently, there are no salts that come from the Himalayan mountains, but are mined from the salt ranges of Pakistan. Black salt is most commonly also from salt mines of Pakistan, Bangladesh, and India. Black lava salt or red salt are most commonly from Hawaii. These salts have 84% sodium chloride and 16% trace minerals. Black lava salt has charcoal, and red salt has iron oxide. Now, my measure of health is oxidative stress. Any food that increases your oxidative stress is not so healthy. And when you cook, would you ever use a rusted iron skillet? Talk about oxidative stress. I threw my iron skillet away. Iron is the second most abundant metal on Earth. And when you go hiking, if you see red rocks, that means there's iron in that rock. That's natural and why red salt is red. There's iron oxide in it. So if you don't want to eat from a rusted iron skillet, then you may want to avoid pink and red colored salts. Now, this may surprise you as iron is an essential micronutrient too. The difference is that iron is even more toxic and its absorption from the digestive tract is tightly controlled. Iron kills many things, including malaria parasites, and that's how the medication chloroquine works. Now, there are two kinds of iron in your food, heme iron and non-heme iron. Heme iron is found abundantly in red meat, and non-heme iron is in both animals and plants. Between the two, non-heme iron is more difficult to absorb, which can be increased when you pair your foods with organic acids such as vitamin C found in fruits and vegetables. And it's important to also decrease plant chemicals like phytate by pre-soaking your beans for at least 4 hours before you thoroughly cook them. Excess iron can cause cancer and worsen certain bacterial infections. And many studies show that the more meat you eat, the higher your risk of colorectal cancer. So if you are on a carnivore diet or the standard American omnivorous diet, you should get your colon screened by 45. Actually, everybody should be getting their colon screened by 45. However, younger people are getting colon cancer earlier. And by the way, remember how minority groups are more at risk of kidney disease? Well, if you are a descendant from Northern Europe, then you have a higher risk of hemochromatosis, which is a disease in which you are a super iron absorber. Excess iron accumulates in heart tissue, causing arrhythmias and heart failures, joint tissue causing arthritis. It can cause diabetes, erectile dysfunction, early menopause, and damage to liver, causing cirrhosis, enlarged liver, liver cancer, and eventually liver failure. Now, did I mention it has also been linked to causing Alzheimer's plaques? And this is one of the most common genetic disorders in the Western world, affecting 1 in every 300 people in the United States and Canada. And this is why iron supplements are not a good idea if you're not being supervised under a medical doctor. If your multivitamin has iron, you may want to get another brand. Himalayan pink salt is not the same as pink curing salt number 2 or Prague powder number 2, which contains sodium nitrate, which is a preservative used to cure bacon, deli meat, and jerky. That's actually more harmful than sodium chloride. Now, remember back in 2017 where carcinogens were found in blood pressure pills? The FDA withdrew losartan, valsartan, and irbesartan due to the presence of carcinogens called nitrosamines. That was a big deal. It again happened to diabetes drugs like metformin and the antacid drug Zantac in 2020. Now, I don't understand why the FDA banned those drugs but allows sodium nitrates to form nitrosamines in cured meats like salami, pepperoni, hot dogs, and deli meats in your sandwiches. Billion-dollar drugs seem to have a different safety standard than food, even though there are more people eating the food than there are taking these billion-dollar drugs. Nitrosamines is not just in meat, it's in dairy and pickled vegetables. And this is another reason why I avoid these categories of foods. Sodium nitrate causes blood vessel damage, making arteries hard and narrow. It increases the risk of developing diabetes. It can cause a condition called methylhemoglobinemia, which impairs oxygen circulation in the blood and can cause inflammation in the gastrointestinal tract to increase the risk of cancer. The food industry knows that the public understands the harms of sodium nitrate, and instead of adding sodium nitrates directly, they add bacteria in celery juice because bacteria will ferment that celery juice into nitrite. By going about this in a roundabout way, that can avoid labeling it as added nitrates and nitrites. Pretty clever, huh? Even if they didn't add sodium nitrates, sodium chloride elevates gastric cancer risk. And this is why I don't salt my food. And I don't think salted fermented foods are healthy for the stomach. Speaking of stomachs, a few years ago, my dog ate grilled onions off of an In-N-Out hamburger. And she actually stole the patty, which had grilled onions. Now, onions are great for people, but can cause severe anemia in dogs. Believe it or not, I actually called In-N-Out to try to find the exact amount of onions that they used in burgers, which they couldn't really tell me. They just said they put a spoonful. However, a spoonful of grilled onions is made from quite a lot of raw onions. I called several of my friends frantically for dog advice, but in the end, I just drove her to the vet to get her stomach pumped. And just like people, when you ingest something toxic, activated charcoal was poured down her throat to bind to the toxins to prevent absorption. Normally, when we eat healthy foods, you really want to absorb all the nutrients, right? Hence, I don't get why people like to eat black salt. It's black because it has charcoal. By the way, the dog is fine after a few $100. That was expensive charcoal. Now, Himalayan salt and fleur de sel may have trace amounts of other minerals to make them taste different. But in reality, the beneficial are in such tiny amounts that they are essentially clinically non-existent. The toxic ones, though, are a different story. Microplastics are known to contaminate salt, especially those made from our oceans. But lake salt, rock salt, and well salt can also be contaminated. Heavy metals have been known to contaminate salt during the manufacturing process, with lead, cadmium, mercury being the deadliest. The thing is, once you accumulate these heavy metals, your body essentially can't get rid of them, and they accumulate in your organs. And this is a lifetime of accumulation from repeat exposures through your food, your water, as well as the air that you breathe. Once I went to Alaska and was panning for gold in the river. I actually found a tiny flake of gold. It was so small that I had to put it on a napkin to see it. Now, obviously, it was essentially worthless. However, over time, if I collected a little flake every single day, those flakes could potentially add up and be worth something one day. And this is essentially accumulating trace toxins in salt. Now, kosher salt is like pretzel salt, as both are coarse sodium chloride. Sea salt is fine sodium chloride. Rock salt is still mostly sodium chloride and comes in large rocks. It also has trace minerals depending on the salt mine it comes from. I would be skeptical of any shade of pink and black. Iran bans rock salt due to heavy metal contamination, which is often not visible. Now, when it comes to health, there's no question that added sodium chloride in every form that I just listed has the potential to elevate your blood pressure to abnormal values. Now, if you want to live longer and be healthier, no matter your weight, fix your blood pressure and get it normal. There are millions of both skinny and obese people with strokes and heart disease because they have high blood pressure. But before you get something catastrophic, the body may give you warning signs through performance issues like erectile dysfunction and back pain, or even infectious diseases. Your entire body is dependent upon good blood flow. Therefore, any sodium that elevates your blood pressure is not good. The only sodium additive that I know that won't elevate your blood pressure is actually miso. And if you want to learn more about miso, check out the next video.